folks, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Finish Line, Navigating the Journey After Residency. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Sherman, pediatrician and physician coach. And today my guest is a good friend of mine who is a pediatric neurologist, and his name is James Takahashi. How are you doing, James?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks so much for joining me in our podcast. James is a proud native of New Jersey. He did his residency and fellowship at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and in pediatric neurology. So I imagine pediatrics and neurology kind of combined there with that whole thing. He completed all of that in 2023, and now he works at an academic institution as a neurologist, physician, pediatric neurologist, and he is the neurology clinical lead for the second year medical students in the neurosciences course. And James is an aficionado of music and guitars, and is married with two lovely daughters, and is going to tell a little bit about his story and about what it's like to be a new attending after finishing up all that training that medical school and residency and fellowship call you to do. So welcome again, James.
Thank you so much. It's great being here.
Great. So James, let's start where you are now, and then we can kind of go backwards. So why don't you give us an idea of what your job consists of now? And we're in 2025, so you are a little over a year out of training, or
little over a year that I've been working, which has been pretty good. It's so right now I do both outpatient and inpatient. A lot of what I enjoy actually is more of the inpatient side. I've always known that, but it's a good balance between the two. What's also nice is that when I was looking for a job and trying to start my career, education was a really big part of what I was very passionate about. And so what ultimately happened is I was given the ability to help lead a course, which was always my dream. It was always the big thing that I wanted to do. And so they gave me the opportunity basically to be the clinical lead for this neurosciences course, like I told you. So our second year medical students, they basically have to take the course where they're learning about the brain, they're learning about all the different aspects of it, really preparing them for step one. And so this several month course is basically now my baby, which I'm working with the person who kind of represents the Office of Education as well. So it's the two of us working together, so he can handle a lot of it. I can handle the content part. It's a very, very nice deal.
Wow. So do you think that that's pretty unusual for a first year attending to get that gig as head of the second year neuroscience course?
I mean, I think it is very fortunate I was able to get it. I mean, I definitely feel very, very lucky, when it comes down to it. I think the main thing is that I think I'd been so used to for a long time kind of accepting that there were certain things I was able to have and certain things I was not able to have. And it was a muscle I'd never really used before, asking and really advocating for myself, which was a big deal. And so I basically told them flat out, this is something that I would really love to do. It's something that I'm very passionate about. If there's any way to make it possible, let's do it. Because I live and breathe teaching as well as medicine. And so I knew that I'd be suffocating if I didn't do it. And it just so happened to be that there was this opportunity that they had originally not thought of for me, but kind of made itself clear. And as I got to know it more and more and more, it became more in line with the things that I was really looking for. I think the other big thing is that I was very interested in building something new. There's a lot of active learning happening in medical schools right now, and it's something that myself and my partner, Dr. Gratian, who helps me run the course, are very passionate about too, is this idea of there are new and novel ways to teach in medicine, and with neurology being a course which is particularly difficult, Finding a novel way to approach something like that and getting people really excited about it is the thing that really gets me going. And so, honestly, I think it was a combination of the opportunity was there, as well as I was just so insistent on having it. But again, it was a skill I had to learn how to have, was really advocating for myself and really saying, like, these are the things I'm really looking for the rest of my career.
Great. I want to get back to that whole idea of self advocacy because as a coach, I think that that's an area that I work with physicians quite a bit on, uh, who find themselves in places where they wish they weren't or they'd rather be somewhere else. But this whole idea of speaking up for themselves to people of power, especially people who have exerted that power upon them in the past, is very, very challenging. Um, but I want to kind of go back a little bit to your story about how you got to where you are now. Because I know that you teach and then you also do clinical work, like you say, but outpatient, inpatient, gives you a variety of activities throughout the week, I'm sure. But I know that you didn't take the rocket ship course to medicine like I did directly from high school to college to med school to where get spat out at the end. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. I in undergraduate I had this idea that I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach at a higher level. I majored in history. My main thing I was doing was on Chinese art and economic history, which is so far away from what I do, but also strangely very similar to what I do now. And ultimately went to grad school. My intention was to do a PhD in history and economics, and really kind of get involved in scholarly work. But unfortunately, around that time, there was really not a lot of a future in doing a PhD in the humanities. Getting a job would be really, really difficult. Getting tenure is increasingly getting more difficult. And so I didn't see a future in that really anymore. So what happened is that I kind of just found the first job that landed in my lap. I gave me the opportunity to travel the world. It was kind of business focused, to very kind of glamorous in some ways, and then I was flying out and visiting new places, but also just tiring and not exactly what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And so what happened is that I started doing some nonprofit work just on the side, some volunteer work and things like that. And my original aim was I wanted to learn how to build houses. They had all these projects of building houses in different countries. And so I signed up for one of these, and they actually put me on the medical team. And so I ended up doing medicine instead. And I remember being so upset about it. Like there was nothing I wanted to do less than medicine at that time. But I did it for a couple weeks, and it just blew me away. And I just remember where I was at that time before I went, which was that I had a friend who was going to medical school,
Mm-hmm.
who was telling me about anatomy and doing dissections. And I remember saying to her, this was maybe 2 weeks before I went off on this trip, there's no way
No
you
way.
can ever get me in there. And and now I'm a professor at that medical school. So it's a very strange thing. So I think what happened after that is it really the big question to me became, by the time I'm 40, what is it that I'd like to be doing? Right? Knowing that I'd have enough time to accomplish whatever I wanted to. And honestly, the medicine thing really just got to me. It got to me
Hmm.
on a very academic level. I liked the fact that there was so much learning involved. I liked working with my hands, and moreover, I liked having a service. Like I think that we really do provide such an excellent service. So I ended up doing a post-baccalaureate program, which prepped me for med school, and then got into med school, which was such a great honor. And yeah, so I entered into med school when I was, or rather got into med school when I was 26. So a little bit older, not too much
Yeah.
older,
Yeah.
but still had the perspective of having lived a little bit of a life before that.
Sure.
And then from there, just did my training over at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and then moved back to New Jersey after all that was said and done.
Wow. Okay. So a couple of questions that I have. One is entering medical school at that age, like you say, it's not terribly older. I mean, I think I mean, I went to medical school, my 40th anniversaries, whatever they call reunions coming up. But um, I think the average age in my class entering was around 25 or 26. But I think that was really skewed because there were some people that were like 40, 50 years old. But for you entering in at that age, did you look around you? Was that a challenging adjustment to look around and see people who were younger than you who had not had that life experience? What was that like going through med school?
Yeah, I don't think it was particularly difficult. I think it was enlightening, and in many ways, I would say it was invigorating, right? Knowing that there were so many people out there who were so driven, and it kind of got me going as well. But the nice thing also was perspective, right? We all came in with a very different perspective from different lives. I wasn't the only person who had worked beforehand. I was not anywhere close to being the oldest person in my med school class. And so what was nice is that it kind of owed itself to we all had different skills and abilities. Some of us were bringing in maturity. Some of us were younger, but were more mature, more mature in some ways than the older ones.
Mhm.
And I think that we were all kind of united by the fact that we were all working really hard towards this singular goal.
Mhm.
So again, seeing that vigor and energy of like a 21-year-old working, 26 is not too far off, but it kind of tells you like, oh no, I can really push myself hard now.
Mhm.
The other nice thing about it is that, quite frankly, I'd say one of the big advantages of having, lived a little bit of a life of having traveled and worked, is the sense that, quite frankly, the grass is always greener no matter where you are. If I was working really, really hard in med school and thinking, oh, it could be easier somewhere else. No, it wasn't. It was just as hard in some ways, right? It
Wow.
was just as tumultuous. And so it gave me some perspective, which was very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And then pediatrics, was it pediatrics first and peds neurology, or was it the full meal deal?
The full deal, which was a very strange thing for me because so it's 5 years. It's 2 years of pediatrics, 3 years of child neurology, and so you're interviewing for both pediatric residency and for neurology fellowship at the same time. So you'd have one day of pediatrics, the other day was just neurology, and it was crazy. I mean, there was a
Mm.
time when you were like flying from place to place and interviewing in all of them. I managed to somehow secure something like 2 or 3 months off, and so I just got into my car and I drove across the country something like 2 or 3 times in order to interview at all these places. But it was
Wow.
it was a trip. It was definitely a trip.
Wow. And what was it about pediatrics and neurology specifically that was so attractive to you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, where do we even start with that?
I don't know
I
why
love
everybody doesn't want to be a pediatrician, but I don't know, a pediatric neurologist.
listen, I think I knew right off the bat that my personality was a little bit better suited for pediatrics. I tend to be a very silly person, and I need to be lighthearted in my work. But the other part of it is that there's so many very interesting things happening in child neurology, even right now. The kinds of treatments that we're seeing now are, listen, diseases that we couldn't even touch, you know, when I started medical school are now things that we have treatments for. Just the world of gene therapy has really kind of expanded our field. Our ability to treat certain diseases has really expanded. And so I wanted to be in a field which, quite frankly, would be drastically different when I leave it. So that way I can be a part of that, kind of discovery and adventure with it. But it still blows me away the things that we can do now that we couldn't even do 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. I know that I probably don't even know about all those things. That's why your people are around. Send them to you. Um, so so then you made the decision to pursue number one a subspecialty in pediatric neurology, and then secondly to take the academic route as opposed to uh, joining a private practice or an employed position. And I know in pediatrics it's a little different than adult medicine. If you are a subspecialist in pediatrics, certain ones, it's almost essential that you're part of some academic institution or teaching institution. um, to support you, but that decision to take that academic route as opposed to either an employed position or private practice or something like that. Tell me how what went into that decision.
I mean, that was a pretty straightforward decision for me, I'll be
Mm,
quite frank. I had this perspective already that, if I wanted to make more money, I wouldn't be doing medicine. Having worked in business for a little while and having traveled, I knew how much easier it was to make this much money. And so what I was looking for was I was looking for things that really kind of fit my values. Number one was, quite frankly, I want to see things. A lot of your academic institutions are going to have that really robust inpatient service that are able to see a variety of things. I like to tell my residents all the time that when I'm working on a differential for my diagnoses, that things never are really taken off. They only go up and down because we still need to be very creative and almost artistic with how we're thinking of things, right? Sometimes a lot of the things we see can defy logic. And I wanted more of those kinds of puzzles. I felt like, a lot of the private practices that I was interviewing at, there were a lot of interesting cases, don't get me wrong, but not to the same degree that a lot of the academic institutions were seeing. The other part of it was the teaching. I knew for a fact that I wanted to teach. I wanted to be able to kind of create something within an educator type of a role. And this is why I bring it back to when I was in college and the things that I was really looking to do, right? I wanted to be a professor and teach. I was very passionate about teaching, about communicating, about, getting people as excited about something as I am. And quite frankly, I achieved that. And so, whereas when I was in my PhD program and I basically left, deciding that this was not the route for me, I thought that that door was closed. But when I was in residency and really seeing the opportunities that were available out there, it's like, no, actually, I never actually took a step back. I never left that career, as it turns out. I sidestepped and worked it forward in a very different way. And so now, instead of teaching about trade routes and Silk Road, I can teach instead about some of the more esoteric aspects of why your brain does the things it does, and that really gets me going.
yeah. So the idea of that kind of innovative, creative, cutting edge, plus being able to have a teaching role, and that be a major part of what you do. So as you've as you've kind of entered into academic medicine, I know that that means different things to different people, and and for some it means kind of when we talk about reaching the finish line. It for some it means jumping on another train or starting another race, which then becomes this academic race of trying to reach the next milestone, whether that's promotion, whether that's grants, whether that's um, uh, you know research and trying to get recognition within the department. Can you talk about some of those pressures that may be there or may not be there, and how much control you have over that?
That's a really good question. I think honestly, if it's not coming from the department in terms of pressure, it's coming from ourselves, right?
Mm,
Going through training, I think what was really important is how knowledgeable am I? How much work am I doing? How much am I progressing? Where am I at? And so a lot of my identity in residency really stemmed from my performance in my job or my ability to kind of get to the next year and do it in a really stellar way. I would have to say, like, are the pressures there to publish and to work hard and see patients? Absolutely. There's no question. I think that's true no matter where you're at. Even if you're in private practice, there's still productivity goals, things that you really need to meet. So that's true no matter where you're at, in or out of medicine. But I think what I've done though is I've taken a lot of the pressure off of myself to need a lot of the things that, quite frankly, I thought I needed before. And so, for example, prestige. Does it matter so much about the prestige, or does it matter a little bit more the kind of impact I have on the lives of my patients or on my colleagues, right? Or my students is a big one. Do I still have the time to do the things that I really enjoy, which is another big deal, right? Am I as much a father as I am a physician and an educator? So yes, there is this drive to publish. There is this drive to kind of go the mile one way or another. But I think that what's changed now is the idea that, listen, when I get promoted, or when I get that publication, it's not going to be this fulfilling warm blanket that I think it should be, or once thought it should be. It's just another milestone. And I'm willing to get to the milestones, no question, but not really expecting to get meaning out of it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, okay. So you touch on something really important, and that's the whole identity thing about the physician identity and what that means to different people. And a lot of what we experience going through medical school and training kind of pushes this on us, this idea of what we should be, who we should be, and how we should be. Trying to hold on to our own personal identity can be a challenge. Um, how was that for you?
It was definitely a huge challenge. I remember in residency having been kind of crushed by my own expectations, really unrealistic expectations of, what should I be able to do? What should I be able to accomplish? How much sleep do you really need this evening, right? And pushing the limits to the point where now I was kind of breaking. And I think it kind of at the time, if you had asked me about it, I would have said, I wish I could have just gone through this as seamlessly as possible. But now in retrospect, I would have to say it was probably the most valuable thing. I'm just going to put my hand up real quick because there's a train passing by. And so just through the producer, and then I'll kind of restart once the train
Okay.
passes. Sorry.
It's a good spot being at the train. I heard like a little hint.
Yeah, a little bit. All right. So not sure where I kind of left it before,
You're
but
talking about
basically
identity. Yeah.
yeah. So I think ultimately going through that, if you had asked me about it, I would have said, oh, this is one of the worst things, right? Being under scrutiny, feeling that you're not good enough, things like that. And I really think I pushed myself to the edge to some degree, like no question. Um, but it was actually a really important time for me. If it had not happened, I think I would have still been in a very prestige kind of work myself to death type of mindset. What it did is it gave me perspective. I kind of starved myself of all the things that really made me who I was during residency. And it became clear I needed to bring some of those things back. And it makes me think about a moment when one of the leaders in our medical school actually sat me down and asked me to write on a piece of paper the things that I really enjoy. And so I did so and told me, don't put anything down about medicine. And so it was things like playing guitars, playing music, being out there running and climbing a mountain or doing something insane, being somewhere I've never been to before. And told me flat out, these are the things you want to do for the rest of your life. And in that moment in residency, thinking back to that list, I wasn't doing any of that. I had become more of a physician than a person, which was so difficult. And so looking for a job afterwards became a very clear mission of I need to start asking and advocating for certain things in my life. But I also still feel very strongly that I need to do excellent work. I need to be able to provide great care. I need to teach really well. But I can now balance these things a little bit better.
Wow. So you had someone in medical school do that for you. Someone in
Yes.
medical school really kind of point out how important it was to hold on to your identity and not let it get sucked out of you and to write it down. And I love the idea of writing these things down. Keeping journals is something I know that some people don't like writing. I know audio journals are another way of trying to reflect. But I think it's so important to do whatever you can to hold on to who you are before so many other people who you have to live up to their expectations and your own, like you say, your own sound like they were higher than anybody who you were working with, because you forget who you are. You can forget all of that because you're following somebody else's path.
Yeah, no question. And I think that, kind of the theme of my life from the time that I left my PhD program to really kind of going to the end of residency was I was looking for that thing that would justify everything, right? And like if I worked a little bit harder, that box that was just hovering in front of me, I'd finally get my hands on it, and out of it would flow all this meaning and warmth and fulfillment. And I think that for me as a resident, my thought was once I had that attending gig, that box is going to be waiting for me on that desk. And the silly thing is that, when I did get the attending gig and I got the office and there was this imaginary box on that desk and I opened it up, there wasn't anything in there. There wasn't any like new feeling. I was the same confused person that I was before. But what did I now have? Now I'm climbing mountains, I'm hiking, I'm biking, I'm seeing my kids, I'm doing all these other things. And it's because I really don't think that my job was designed to give me that full meaning. And in fact, all along, I had my family, I had my wife with me, later on, my kids, among other things. These were the things that I would have to say really give me the meaning. That's where my box was, but I was holding it the whole time. I wasn't looking down, though, I was looking forward the whole time.
Wow, I love that image. I love that image of because there's this phenomenon of, I'll be happy when, I'll get my sleep later or I'll do this later. And for you, you had the foresight and the realization and having a family, going through that with your family, I think gives you that perspective. Um, and yet there are tremendous pressures. There's a lot of pressure to act a certain way, behave a certain way, to I mean, we have a lot of power. We have power. We can perform things with our skills that give us validation and affirmation, and that can become addictive at times. I know for me it had in the past. How do you say that you're able to do the things you enjoy? How do you kind of prevent yourself from slipping back to that kind of previous high expectations constantly?
Honestly, I don't know if I do it the best, right? I'm doing I'm doing my best. I kind of think of it like when I'm running, I haven't gotten myself to the point where with every single run, I'm just going, I'm running and I'm constantly mindful of the fact that my feet are just starting to ache or that I would really like to stop right now or it's getting really cold right now. So my mind is still going in a way where quite frankly there's this spring trying to bring me back to where I was. There's no question. But it requires work. It's something that I have to remind my residents and my medical students all the time is listen, you've gotten yourself to the point now where if you wanted to sit down and read a book for 12 hours, you can do it. But one of the hardest things to try to convince, let's say, our second year medical students is take a day out of your week that you're studying step one when you're filled with the most insecure thoughts. You're afraid that any moment you take off, you might be contributing to a failure of a test that's so important to you. But take that day, see how you feel about it. Because sometimes when I take a day off, I still boil in it, still have this feeling of, oh, there's something else I should do. But kind of like the run, it's going to take effort now, but later on, it's just going to get easier and easier. And I think that's the thing I've noticed is that, being able to concentrate a little bit on myself, on seeking out self-care. These are not natural things for me, but they're now practiced things. And so hopefully it'll just get easier and easier as I go. But by no means did I ever flick a switch.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm curious about when we talk to other guests that I've had about family and partners, life partners, and how important they are in trying to keep us balanced, trying to keep us grounded in that. And you're married, your wife has been a part of that whole journey with you.
Yeah.
Is what do you see her? her role in trying to keep you grounded here?
Oh, Lord knows. I mean, I would not be. I'd be flying into space if it not if not for her. What's nice is that we met each other very very young. I'm now
Mm,
at a point where, quite frankly, I've known her for longer than I haven't known her. Two of us have been together now for going on to 20 years, which is
wow.
crazy to think about because I'm so early in my career. But she's always been the stone to me at every instance. I think I'm always been this kind of person where, quite frankly, if there's a cloud in the distance I haven't parted yet, then I'm gonna run. I'm gonna try to find out what's there. And my wife is the person who's always been like, no, no, let's slow down. Let's think about this. Let's kind of work and ease things through. I think of her as being the voice of reason, quite frankly. There are moments where I can get very excited about things. I think about when I was in my third year, I was so gung ho about surgery, loved it, loved being on that rotation. But it took my wife to sit me down and really say, James, you are tired. You are extremely tired, and you're kind of burned out right now, right? And so I need that outside perspective. We always joke around that on my wife's resume somewhere is written the word patience, and then it has my name underneath that as a reference. Because she's had to put up with a lot. I remember having the conversation about leaving my PhD with her, and her saying, "All right, we're gonna make it. We're gonna try to do this." I remember coming back from my trips abroad and having done a couple, and saying to her, I'm thinking of doing a career in medicine. She said, all right, let's do it. And so she never had any doubt that I'd be able to accomplish the things that I did, which I was so thankful for because I doubted every moment. But more importantly, in moments where, quite honestly, things were particularly difficult or challenging, she was the person that, again, gave me that perspective and that wisdom that kept me going.
Mm.
And when I think back now, as kind of the strength of our relationship has certainly been the fact that we've been through so much together. But I have to admit that something like residency, and I'm sure other people can kind of mirror this sentiment, was a moment where she was effectively a single parent. I was working so many hours. I was working overnight. There were weeks I didn't see my kids, much less the son. And so bless her for sticking with me through all that, but now I have to make it up to her.
Wow, that's right. The support has to go both ways. It's something that yeah, we learn and it never stops. Never stops. Um, so now you're just embarking on this career, you're just getting started, and you know, back in the old days, people began practice after training as physicians, and it became our identity. It was kind of like this is who we are, and the idea of doing something else was kind of novel. You'd have to figure out where it fit in. And then also this idea of ultimately maybe stopping or shifting to do something different or having any type of change in your life. As you look forward, are there things that you think about that a trajectory that your career might take?
That's a really good question. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't thought too deeply, just given the fact that I'm still trying to grow my own legs right now. So I haven't thought
Mhm.
about running. But I really, again, I'm very passionate about the teaching aspect. We're in the last week of teaching this course. It's the first time I've done it. The reviews are looking okay, and I, quite frankly, I'm really energized by it. I wake up in the morning and I'm just saying to myself, all right, let's do it. Let's lecture today. Let's create something. Let's really try to do something new today. I just had a conversation with the actual course lead just a few days ago, and the two of us were thinking, what we could do? We could do some escape rooms and some games, and we could do some interesting stuff and really teach people. And it's crazy how receptive people, like medical students, who quite frankly will tell you when something's a waste of their time, how many of them are really open to something like that. And so I see myself in the coming decades as being still in that educator type of a role. Obviously, I still want to be taking care of patients, no question, but I really want to serve as more of a mentor by that point. I think that's the thing I'm really looking most forward to. Whether or not I make full professor or anything like that, quite frankly, I'm not thinking too much about kind of that aspect. Instead, I'm thinking of more the impact of my job, the people who I can really kind of work with and maybe improve their lives in some way. We'll see. Some people would say I'm already doing that, but I think that there's so much more for me to learn and so much for me to do as well.
Wow. Then that's really living in the moment, living in where you are right now, being grateful for being in a place that you find fulfilling, rewarding. Uh, because I think that there are a lot of physicians out there who they get to the finish line, they start their careers, and all of a sudden it's not what they expected. It's not they're deluged in administrative work and a lot of bureaucracy, and that whole idea of the relationship between patient and doctor gets kind of diminished and uh, reprioritized to go down the list. But it sounds like you're in a good situation where you are right now.
Yeah, and it was a very, I had a really nice picking of places I could have gone to. And it became clear that where I was and where I was interviewing, they were living the kind of life that I was kind of looking for and how they were taking care of their patients or the kinds of priorities that they really had in their day to day. I think that, quite frankly, the pressure is always there to see more patients. There's no question for me, for example, like I really want to expand out my clinics, like the demand and the need is really there. But I also have to be kind of mindful in the sense that I'm a person, right? I'm a medical human. I'm a person working in medicine. And people have limits as well. And knowing what those limits are and advocating is going to be important. So far, that's something that my program has been very, very open to, which has been great. So I do feel heard and understand that, there are certain things that, I can definitely get. But on the other hand, I think that to expect a situation where they're not going to ask anything of you is also unrealistic. There are sacrifices, things that you're going to have to make kind of going forward. And, honestly, I know where my line is. I'm not going to really compromise on that line, but it's never really approached it. It's always been a nice, easy balance and understanding of where everybody's kind of coming from.
And you say you have been able to advocate to have the variety of activities and the type of activities that you prefer to have in your job. How much choice did you have in that?
Actually, I had a surprising amount, which was really nice. And I think it came down to, when I was given a contract, it was always with this mindset of these are the things that I want. These are the kinds of like this is the percentage that I'd like kind of being covered in terms of like my paid time for education. And it was honestly, it was just a back and forth. I think that again, the first contract that I got was one where, I counter offered and told them this is kind of the amount that I'm looking for. These are the types of percentages that I'm looking for. It's the kind of role I'm looking for. And quite frankly, they were very open to it. It's very easy to just sign the first contract, but I think it's important to, have a group of people that can look at that contract with you, be able to work out like, okay, if this is my role, what are some of the things that I should be looking for? What is kind of the equivalent package that people that are doing something similar to what I'm doing, well, what kinds of things are they getting as well? And so being mindful of that, not taking the first offer and advocating for yourself really came into play from the very, very beginning. And I think setting that precedent is going to be important because it's really hard, I think, or at least a little, it's harder basically to get some of those things much later on.
Yeah, I think that that's, and obviously you did not get that taught to you in medical school, I imagine, the contract negotiations and how to go through all of that.
Yeah, this is why I was so happy that I had the career before I went into medicine, right?
Exactly.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's no contract is final until you sign it.
Yeah.
And nothing should really be just dictated to you directly. Should be a conversation. And if there's a reason why you're not getting something, there should be a fair explanation as to why as well. And it could very well be that something is not possible for very good reason. So at least having that understanding can really avoid some bitterness down the line.
Yeah, this is one area, another area where medicine has evolved tremendously. The first job I got out of residency was in a private practice, pediatrics, and there was no contract. There was this little note card piece of paper that said year one, this amount, year two, this amount, year three, this amount, year whatever, year five partner, something like that. And there was nothing else there. That was it. It was just that. And I said, well, what about vacation? What about benefits? And what about, oh, yeah, we take care of everything. And it's like, well, what do you mean everything, everything? And they weren't lying. It really was that. It was 100% of everything they just took care of.
Yeah, I think of some
Seamlessly.
cultures. There's some cultures out there where they talk about how the only way for your child to learn to not touch the stove is to have them touch the stove. And, what was kind of nice is that I had been through a situation having left college where I was getting hired by a company that wanted me to move to China. There were some interesting opportunities out there that they were doing, and they gave me this contract that when I looked at it, it made no sense to me. It was an amount of money that was lower than I wanted. It had the stipulation that I couldn't leave my job for something like 2 years. It was a very, very I think stark lesson in the fact that you have to read these things. You have to know what you want. You can't just sign off on the first desperate thing that comes into your lap. And so, having been through these kinds of contracts before, when I was looking at my contract now, knowing that it wasn't exploitative in any way, it wasn't difficult for me to ask for things and to ask for clarification on things. Whereas before, even with this crazy contract in hand, it was really hard. It was
Mhm.
really hard for me to get that kind of information or clarification. It was so uncomfortable to ask for things.
Yeah, that's great. You had that knowledge and great advice to try to get other people involved with reviewing the contracts and to try to people with different expertise, people that have legal knowledge or people that have kind of knowledge of the course of academics and what things you need to consider as you try to decide what it is that you want your job to look like. Um, I'm really happy that you were able to design a position that really kind of fills your needs and gives you the kind of fulfillment that you were looking for.
Yeah, no, it's honestly sometimes I have to pinch myself. I recognize how lucky I am, but at the same time, I know that there was temptation looking at some other places, right? You see certain names on an application and you're just like,
Hmm.
wow, this is
Hmm.
something I'm saying no to right now. And
Hmm.
so my wife calls it the prestige trap. I agree.
Hmm.
It's this idea that, ooh, those big, big name schools, that's a really cool place to be. But the other thing that I was really seeking out was the ability to build something in a program that wanted me to build. And I chose the one that basically allowed me to do that.
Wow. All right. That's fantastic. All right. Just have a couple more questions for you. And the first one is so if you could speak to your younger self, that person that was kind of coming out of residency and was trying to decide about what was going to happen next, what advice would you give yourself back then?
Sure. That's a really good question. That was a very prestige minded person who honestly wanted people to be proud of him. And, I don't know if I really found that message within myself. I had externalized a lot of it. And so what I would probably tell myself is, just stop, breathe a little bit, look at yourself in the mirror, understand that this is a very difficult and crazy time, that there's no easy way to go through it. And to just go to a mountain, do the things that you actually enjoy and stop trying to find more meaning or more love or more happiness in the job, because I think the job was just so difficult that it was never going to do that. I kind of talk about pediatric neurology as almost like riding a roller coaster. It's great, it's fantastic, and it's fun. But riding a roller coaster every 20 minutes for 14 straight hours is exhausting. And to understand that, listen, when you're doing something that much, it's probably not going to be something you love in that moment, and that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That's good. That's good advice. And then the last question is, and I think you have more fodder to kind of come up with the answer for this one, but if you were not a pediatric neurologist right now and you could choose to be anything you wanted in this moment, what else would you be?
Honestly, I'd be building guitars right now. I'd be collecting rosewood. I'd be piling up mahogany. I'd be in a workshop, waking up and just getting that in. There's
Wow.
this great feeling you get when you get a new guitar and you just smell the inside of it. And if it's an acoustic guitar and what you smell is that wood shop, I could smell that every day.
Wow. How exciting. Wow. So, James, thank you so much for your time and spending that time with us today, and all that you are contributing to pediatric neurology and all those fortunate medical students who have you as their teacher, their preceptor, somebody that can help them look at the balance in life and what's really important. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Okay, so that's it, and thank you for joining us for this episode.